This is On Base, your one-stop shop for solving your most pressing B2B go-to-market challenges. Each week, hosts Chris Moody and Paul Gibson talk to sales and marketing leaders to get you in-depth insights and creative strategies to set your revenue teams up for success.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm your host, Chris Moody. I'm very excited to be with Kathy Macchi today, and we're going to talk about gearing up for the future, adapting strategies for changing buyer behavior. So Kathy is a long time, she did put that in twice, survivor of the technology industry with over 25 years of sales, marketing, and IT experience. She actually understands how all that tech and data work. So Kathy's role, she's the EVP of innovation at Inverta. We just did a webinar together too. We've spent lots of time together. Really excited to have you on the show, Kathy.
Thank you, Chris. It's a beautiful introduction, so thank you. And I think it was just a typo. It is a long time though, so.
That was my favorite part, right? Like when you double up, I read it as intentional, like a little jab that you're taking at yourself there. So,
well, it's probably true. I think it was a Freudian slip then. Yes.
No, I mean, so much of what we're seeing is cyclical and it happens over and over. So I do think being in the same game for 20 years or more, you are going to see a lot of repeating behaviors and how to correct that.
What's old is new again. It is so funny. In fact, this week at a conference, and we ended up talking about, which I know this is not the podcast topic, about reporting. And I said, oh my goodness, I can remember with Julie Schwartz of ITSMA back in like 2000, 2001, that marketing is struggling with reporting. And she had a couple years of new report, and she goes, oh my God, nothing has changed.
It really hasn't. I mean, now we can debate attribution. We can talk about if we're looking at metrics that matter to the whole revenue team or just to our team. It's the same conversation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to understand, you work a lot with manufacturing companies and plenty of other industries, but how are the buyer behaviors starting to change in manufacturing? And what challenges do you see that this may pose for traditional sales strategies?
You know, that is really interesting. And I actually learned marketing at a manufacturing company. So it's been interesting to change. But you know what? At this point, no one's immune. Buyer behavior is changing. You know, they're no longer an individual buyer like used to have. It's a buying group. A lot of the buying group's anonymous. The buyer decides if and when they want to speak to the seller. And the buyers are getting younger. That was one of the last surveys, and this is how they want to do business. And so I think, Chris, to your question, the big shift is how hard is that shift going to be to this new reality versus those ingrained sales and marketing processes? And I think from a people standpoint, it's going to be, you know, the relationship was always very important in those deals. Like you knew that buyer at Walmart and you just knew that type of stuff. And I think what's shifted is how relationships now, even though they're important, how they're developed, nurtured, and maintained. And that is a huge deal. And I think the other thing that comes up is there's a big shift in that go-to-market process. And I think leaders underestimate what's really going to be involved in making that change. And I also think on the tech side, CRM usage is so low. I had one seller that paid someone to enter stuff in. He made that much money. He's like, no, she works for me. She doesn't work for the company. There's no rigor or discipline keeping it up to date. But it's, you know, I've been thinking about that. Like that could almost be a blessing in disguise in that they're not going to have to undo all that obsession with MQLs or processes. It's almost like, you know, places that didn't have like landlines and they just go immediately to cell phones and 5G. Like it could be they don't have that tech debt. They don't have that process debt. I don't know if it'll happen, but you could look at it on the bright side.
Love that. Yeah, I actually was trying to explain pagers to my children. And, you know, hey, it used to be if you wanted someone to call you, you would use the separate device to say, call me. And they're like, why wouldn't you just send that on the phone? Right. So, you know, it's hard to go back to things that were not that long ago, but for a lot of markets, we run into this too. So it's not just certain industries like manufacturing, but for folks who may say, hey, account-based marketing, that's a future state. I need to worry about what I have to do right now, or my book, or my relationships, or what got me here can always work. What would you say to those types of folks that may have the wait and see approach?
I don't think you have that option anymore. I mean, the buyers have changed, and do you want to get on the train or not? And I think buyers are just expecting, like, this is what my experience would be for pre-sales, during the buyer's journey, and post-sales. And if your go-to-market doesn't match their reality, they're just going elsewhere. And in fact, Chris, I don't know if you saw, there was a BCG report a while back, and I think they estimated that $2 trillion is lost each year for SG&A costs and lost revenue potential because of inefficient go-to-market, which is all that means is, and I dealt with this when I worked at a manufacturing company. We eventually did, but initially couldn't align internally on the people, the process, the technology, how sales and marketing work together to make it easy to buy from us. It's the customers that pushed it. They finally said, if you guys don't have 5 different reps coming to me for 5 different products, like, we're not doing business with you. So you don't have an option if you want to stay in business.
Yeah, totally. That brought back great and painful memories of the origin of marketing clouds. And I vividly remember being acquired into one. Everyone was pushing one-stop shop consolidation. And then you'd go to a customer and there would be 6 or 7 sales reps sitting around the table, kind of going down the line, talking about, hey, well, this is the part of the car that I manufacture. And it was almost like Tommy Boy selling brake pads, right? Like, here's your brakes, here's your wheels, here's your car, you know?
Yeah. And sometimes initially, I know when I was there, we put a facade on the front. We had centers where they could deal with one person, but behind the scenes, it was not there yet. But we had to shield that from the customer. That was for us to get together, not for them. So yeah. I mean, you put the burden on the customer, like, you guys figured out, I don't want to do the work. Like, that's crazy.
Totally. It makes sense to say it out loud. And, you know, you hit on alignment too. I'm curious, what are some of the common challenges that you see for manufacturing companies in bringing together sales and marketing and starting account-based strategy?
Oh, culture. Like, number one is culture. And in fact, I was just talking to Terry Flattery the other day from Forrester. And we just talked about that is the biggest blocker right now, you know, like trying to make that change. And to be fair, if you're going to do people, process, technology, just doing one of those is difficult. Doing all 3, I mean, that's a really big lift. So I think that's number one. Number 2 is the sellers. I mean, they pride themselves on knowing their buyers, and they're not big on, let me move to digital tools to find and engage leads. Like, it's not what they do. I think you just have in data silos that are just entrenched and proprietary, and just it's overwhelming to think about breaking those down and doing something different. So if you don't have those digital tools to collaborate across teams, like nearly impossible. And I think marketing has to change a lot. Like in manufacturing, marketing is brand. A huge part is brand. Another big part is they're very strategic marketers, but they're usually working with large clients on these huge strategic initiatives. And then the third one is a lot goes through the channel. So how does this work with your partner channel strategy, which I don't think anyone has nailed right now, to be honest. I mean, I think that's the hard one. And I think the last one is no one has experience in those groups doing it. So like, where do you even start? Like, I just think there's a number of challenges that just makes people go, it's just too hard.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, even just the first one, starting about culture, to change a culture, you have to have someone to pull everyone forward. I mean, it takes a confident, courageous risk taker, because you're essentially betting your job on that. And going back to topo benchmarks, I mean, the last one we did was 2019, but we knew the top 2 indicators of account-based success. It was a tie in the survey. One was sales and marketing alignment. So how well aligned you are indicated success. Yep. And the second was a dedicated account-based leader. So it was that person to pull people, lock arms, and jump off the cliff together and say, there's water down here. We will hit water safely. But it takes that risk, right?
And you have leaders that aren't always on board, who say they're on board, but not. Like, there's just a lot of the political stuff that happens that, you're right, you're risking your job. And a lot of them, I think, don't go well. I think they underestimate really the resources involved and the time involved with making that happen. Or I've had a leader at a manufacturing, we're doing digital transformation, and then sort of washed his hands of it, like just expected that to somehow filter and happen. And It doesn't.
Yeah.
Like you have to have a committed leadership team to make that happen.
So it's more than nailing the keywords. Got it. I will write that
Yes.
down. Yeah, you can't just say digital transformation or account-based
Yes.
marketing. For those who are in manufacturing, they know this. And for those who have not experienced manufacturing, some of the deals, we're talking 7, 8, 9 figures. Like there are huge deals in manufacturing. And I was at GE for a bit, and we always talked about 1% improvement. A 1% improvement is billions of dollars in a lot of these companies. So if we think about that and kind of set the right context, how does account-based marketing help with those huge deals in manufacturing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you're right, because manufacturing, a lot of times they're long-term deals. Like you're signing for this piece of thing that's going to be manufactured for a period of time. That's why those relationships are really important. Like I am not dismissing that at all. So I want to make that clear. It's just how they handle this different. But I think part of the number one, what is it? 65% of the success of any campaign is having the right accounts. And I think ABM is that forcing function to get sales, finance at this point, marketing and ops all on the same page. Like, and really thinking like, do these have the biggest potential, the most potential as to drive a big deal? Like getting that. The next one is 25% is your message, your content, your offer. And I think manufacturing tends to be very product focused for a reason. There's specs you need to meet, but I think there's a shift that they need to go to customer centric marketing, and that's a forcing function. And the third is they just don't have the tech to do it. And so I think that can help with just automating like sales and marketing strategies. So I think those three, but the accounts and the messaging, like that's a forcing function, and then get the technology to support you. But that's a big shift from what, product marketing, usually in a manufacturing company, they own the P&L. Like the marketing team owns it, which is very different than tech where like we're just way over here. Like, so they're the ones that could drive it if they want to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, one thing we talk about a lot internally, well, two things. We talk about getting off zero. So that's, for sales and for everyone, just getting started is so important. That first deal, that first pipeline, that first revenue. If we think about getting started, and that oftentimes this is the second, our biggest competitor is always do nothing. I think everyone talks about, well, our number one competitor is here. We have two main competitors. There are only three of us. But in this space, do nothing is a real legitimate competitor. So what would you say to manufacturing companies for how they should approach getting started with ABM?
I think getting started is one, to your point, just start simple. Like, what is that? Perfect is the enemy of the good. And I've done enough ABM programs where you get this, well, what about, you're putting a list together, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it's everyone's opinion. Like, yes, we could think about that, but at least get something in market and learn. So I've just seen a lot of that. If I hear, what about this account? What about, like, move on. I think the other important thing is picking the right sales leader to do this with, someone who's willing to work differently, who's willing to collaborate, choosing the right, again, getting a shared account list, but then choosing the right goals. Like, is it more at bats? Is it growing your footprint? Because what people quickly forget is how you measure success 3 months, 6 months, 9 months now. Unless you have that goal front and center, let me tell you, that goalpost will keep changing. And I'll add one more because I've seen this happen, and I've seen it with a number of, you've got to keep selling that concept of ABM. So I think your sales leader has to continually reinforce with their sales team, we are working differently, this is how we're going to do it, and is willing to inspect. And if you don't have that, it's not going to come together. It just isn't.
Yeah. Great advice there. And I don't think we've talked about this specifically, but I feel like you and I have had the same conversation hundreds of times. And the term ABM, it has marketing in it, but we know it has to involve sales. It's only successful with sales. And in many instances, when I was on the research and advisory side, ABM was a bit triggering to some sales teams because it was always marketing doing things on their behalf. And the conversation would quickly pivot to what you said about finding the best sales leader or the best seller, right? The best sellers have always worked in an account-based fashion. They've expanded contacts per account. They've built strong relationships. They've understood the pains. So I feel like for manufacturing, anchoring against that is such an important piece to kind of put them at ease a little bit. We're not talking this breakneck futuristic technology or term or tactic. It's really something that they understand and know. We just have to tell the right story to connect the dots.
They naturally do it. Like if I look at the 3 R's, reputation, like do they know who you are? Do they know your full service offering? Do they have a good impression of you? Like every rep knows, well, they hate us. They're never going to do this. The next is, do you have the right relationships? It's only when you have those two, like every good account exec knows that. Then you get revenue. It never goes, oh, I'm going to give you money first. And by the way, what do you do? And who are you? I mean, like, and I agree. So if you can put it in those terms, it's naturally what the best account execs do.
Awesome. Love that. And, for the getting started point, just to wrap that, and then we'll move into some fun questions, even more fun questions. For those who are debating how to get started, please reach out to Kathy. The very last question is, how can people get in touch with you after the podcast? But we have a starter pack that we're doing together to help folks get off of zero and get started. And I think that's something important to mention, because there are plenty of resources and you're there to help.
Excellent. Thank you. I would have forgot to mention that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, let's shift to some that are a little outside of the space, but we love to ask these. The first is on Goodreads. So is there a book, blog, newsletter, website, video, or podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I actually would, two. And I just think there's a lot of nothing out there in marketing. And with AI, it's only going to get worse, but that's a whole other topic. The Marketing AI Institute has a podcast, comes out every Tuesday. I have to tell you, I'm actually excited when it comes out, and I never miss one. And I don't say that about much. And then the second one is the Next CMO book. And it's for people that are CMOs or next. And let me explain why. Because for most people, I think they'll find it a bore, which I hate to say to the authors. I like the authors. And Chris, you'll appreciate this. So think of, how we manage the marketing function has not changed. Like putting together annual plans and marketing plans, we use documents, we use spreadsheets, we use slide decks. We do the plan, we put it away, and we never look at it again, and it's changed a little, like now it's online, but that process has not changed in the 25 years I've been in marketing. It has not changed. And it's counterintuitive because you look at Scott Brinker, what's there? 12,000 marketing technologies out there. But if you have a closer look, it's all around delivery and optimization of a channel. And no one is, it's not how you, like the aggregate management of marketing. And so this book lays out a really nice framework, what I'll call for operational excellence. Like how do you connect your strategy to your actual execution? And I loved it when I found it. Other people, they'd go to sleep, but if you actually want to be a CMO one day, read this book, because it's not about the channels, it's how you manage marketing. And they've done a great job.
Love that. Great recommendation. We will add those to our list. And then we like to talk about great people. Are there any folks in B2B that you think are inspirational that we should definitely get on the show?
All right. So I'll tell you, personally, Scott Vaughn. When I need a thought partner, I always reach out to Scott Vaughn. If you don't know Scott Vaughn, I swear, even if you link in with him, he always finds time. I don't know how he does it. Even when he was CMO at Integrate, he's busy. He's on the road. You send him a note, he'd reply that day. So I just have an amazing admiration for him. The second is Paul Raitzer at the Marketing AI Institute, or Christopher Penn. I think it's Trusted Insights. I follow them on AI. And then the third, and I'd say, and I know everyone's bringing them up, Scott Brinker and David Rabb, but I'll tell you why. What have they been publishing for 15 years? And I still enjoy getting their content. I would challenge any, if you shut off your marketing tomorrow, would anyone call and complain like, hey, where'd that weekly email go? They have managed to put out quality content. Now, I wish David, I loved his customer experience matrix, and I know he's doing more CDP, which I like, but when he comes back in with something on, totally appreciate. And he has a little weekly thing that comes out. Just his style. It's just a little snippy. I don't know. He has a good attitude about, marketing. So.
So great names, and not only kind, amazing people, every single name you mentioned, but some of the smartest folks you will ever meet. I mean, I have had Christopher Penn blow my mind at events, and that would be his intro level course.
I know. I know. And I think it's hard to find. I think like LinkedIn, like everyone reposts or says the same thing. Like that group always says something original say. And that's hard to do. I mean, it's just really hard. And so I appreciate it. And the only thing I'm sad about is I couldn't think of a female.
Well, we can get a
follow-up. They're out there. So I'm sure they're out there, and I would love to be introduced. Well, it used to be Julie Schwartz at ITSMA. I never missed anything, and she's retired. And I'll have to say Bev Burgess, who coined the term ABM, her stuff is also top-notch. But she doesn't publish on a regular basis, not like they do.
Yeah, those are
Except
awesome.
she does have a new book coming out. I'll give her a plug. There's another one coming out.
All right. We might have to get Bev on the show. There we go. All right. Well, Kathy, last, most important question. People are going to want to reach out to you after this podcast, after they listen to it, or if they watch anything on social or online. What is the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Well, if you want to make an impression, send me a handwritten note. But for everyone else, you can just email. So it's Kathy, K-T-H-Y. Actually, if you do Kathy, K-T-H-Y, at Inverta.com or on LinkedIn. But I'd prefer an email. There are many funny stories about how I work with LinkedIn. And if I'm on LinkedIn, I prefer it to be someone I actually know. So.
Love that. And the handwritten notes, that could be a whole follow-up episode. Multiple jobs have come from handwritten notes for me in my entire career. And it's just such an important touch when you actually execute on that. And there are folks who do those every day.
I know. And actually, email is fine. I do not expect a handwritten note. So.
We'll publish your address with the episodes.
No, I will not. So we'll leave it as sometimes electronic is better. So I'll keep with email.
All right. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for your time. This is extremely helpful.
Chris, it's always a pleasure connecting with you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for On Base. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by DemandBase, the only account-based experience platform built for sales and marketing alignment.